The tires of my rental crunched over gravel that should have echoed through the trees, but the air swallowed every sound the moment it left the metal and stone. I turned off the engine at the edge of Pembroke Valley, expecting birdsong or the sigh of wind through the dry June grass. Nothing. The silence was so dense it felt like a pressure change, like stepping off an airplane straight into heavy, humid air. Even my heartbeat seemed muffled inside my skull. I'd come home because my thesis advisor said fieldwork would ground the folklore. Pembroke wasn't in the tourist brochures. It was a pocket of half-forgotten farms and boarded-up gas stations 30 miles from the nearest cell tower. Its only claim to fame was a paragraph in a 1940s WPA travel guide that warned, obliquely, that newcomers to Pembroke should look lively and keep a tune upon their lips. I needed interviews, artifacts, anything better than rumors scraped from message boards. So I parked outside the old feed store that now doubled as a tavern, clicked on my digital recorder and pushed the door open. Inside, a dozen locals sat at rough pine tables. Every one of them was making noise. A lanky woman by the window hummed a warbling scale. Two men in denim jackets clanked mismatched brass bells that hung from their wrists like oversized bracelets. A white bearded farmer tapped a wooden spoon against the rim of his mug in a restless staccato, yet none of it added up to conversation, just a stitched together quilt of aimless sound. When the tavern keeper saw me, he lifted a single finger to his lips in warning, then jabbed it toward a cardboard box of cowbells near the door. I chose one no bigger than a thimble and hooked it through my belt loop, embarrassed by the childish jingle it made each time I moved. Its presence felt ridiculous until the humming paused for half a second and the air thickened, colder. The woman caught herself, coughed and resumed, but that breathless instant lodged in my chest like ice. "Never let it all stop at once," the tavern keeper muttered as he slid a root beer bottle my way. He didn't ring or hum, but he scraped the cap back and forth across the soaked bar in a slow, lazy rasp. "I can tell you're not from around here. You'll want to see Ethan. Lives up on Saddle Road. Boy's got stories. Lost his dad to the homemaker when he was 10. I clicked the recorder off, suddenly self-conscious. The name I'd seen online, repeated in blurry threads, the thing that fills. The locals apparently called it the Holemaker, and somehow that was worse. The drive to Saddle Road wound between cornfields yellowing from drought. I stopped humming John Henry only once when a weathered scarecrow caught my headlight beam and appeared to shiver. My cowbell chimed, and the field stayed silent except for it. No crickets, no frogs. I wanted to blame pesticides and climate change, but the hush felt orchestrated, as if every living thing had been warned. Ethan's house stood at the end of a dirt lane. He greeted me on the porch with a carpenter's hammer in one hand and a cracked ceramic mug in the other. Coffee sloshed near the rim as he lifted it in greeting, small deliberate noise. "I know why you're here," he said without preamble. He gestured to the empty rocking chair beside him. Each time the chair rocked, its back slat squeaked a polite complaint. "Sit. Talk quiet but steady. No long pauses." Ethan was 30, but deep lines bracketed his mouth. A leather cord hung around his neck, threaded through 3 little iron sleigh bells. Their rust and pitting said they were older than he was. "My dad fixed fences," he began. "Said it was honest work for an honest valley, but he disliked the bells, called it superstition." Ethan took a measured sip. "One night the wind died, colder than usual. We were in the barn, loading hay. He stopped to wipe sweat off his neck. That's all. 2, maybe 3 seconds. Silence seeped through the boards like water. Then something heavy brushed the outside wall, and every nail in the timbers groaned. He pushed the hammer's claw into the porch rail, scraping wood. The next morning there was a plug of packed earth where he'd stood, like someone took a shovel of clay, wetted it, and slapped it into the world to stop a leak. A chill zipped under my skin. "You mean a mound of dirt?" "No, smooth, flat to the surface, like the ground itself scabbed over." Ethan's knuckles whitened around the hammer. "You cut it out, it's solid the whole way through. Dad's hammer still inside somewhere." He paused to let the rocking chair squeal. "Now folks wear bells, hum, keep the air broken." 'Cause once it decides you're a hole, it fills you with whatever's handy. Dirt, bark, bone dust, doesn't much care. Lightning flickered across the valley, but thunder never followed. I realized the silence was not mere absence. It was a predator waiting for its prey to go still. That night I checked into the lone motel. The front desk clerk handed me a brass key tied to a tin whistle. "Blow it if you wake and can't think of a tune," she advised. I laughed weakly, but she didn't smile. "You laugh quieter than you think," she added. Room 7 smelled of pine cleaner and stale linens. I set my recorder on the nightstand, bell on my belt, and opened my laptop to draft notes. Key taps filled the room with brittle clicks, and I let the rhythm settle me until the screensaver floated across black pixels. I must have stopped typing to rub my eyes. The moment my fingers left the keys, the hush descended like a pillow over my face. At first, it was only the press of my own breath inside my ears. Then I felt vibration, too deep for hearing, move under the carpet, a collector of tremors gathering where the sound used to be. My right thigh quivered, the little cowbell brushed fabric but did not ring. Another moment and I understood. The room itself wasn't silent, it was listening. I slapped the keyboard, the clatter shattered the tension, and the pressure ebbed. But in that fraction of a second, I'd sensed a presence beneath the floorboards, something big enough to need more than me to fill its emptiness. I typed nonsense rows of letters just to keep the noise alive. VVCC. The ceiling fan clicked on its chain as if moved by a hand. It rattled to life and spun lazy circles, creaking with each rotation. I hadn't touched the switch, but I welcomed the sound, even if I knew nothing mechanical had intervened. Whatever lived in the hush wanted me to keep it at bay. Maybe it valued the game. At 3:04 a.m., a voicemail buzzed onto my phone. No ring, just sudden notification. Area code unknown. I played it. A single second of static, then a wet, compressive squelch, like a fist sinking into mud. Nothing else. The recorder on my nightstand spun its wheels, still capturing the room's ambience. When I rewound, the squelch had come through the air, not the phone. I slept in intervals, laptop balanced across my thighs, screen glowing white so I would not forget to hit a key every few breaths. Dawn finally arrived without birdsong, only the bell hooked to my belt clinking each time I stirred. At breakfast, the tavern keeper silently pushed a folded sheet toward me. Inside were hand-drawn maps marked with X's across the valley. Barn doors, wells, gopher holes. Every void the homemaker had allegedly sealed. Most X's came in clusters around houses. A few dotted the forest where paths ended abruptly. "You're not safe here," he whispered, sliding a fork back and forth on the table to keep sound alive. Curiosity breeds pauses. Pauses breed holes. I wanted to tell him I would be careful, but that promise felt hollow in a place where even words could be swallowed midair. I stuffed the map into my notebook, letting its paper rustle. Outside, the sky was the color of boiled milk, unmoving. As I reached my car, Ethan jogged across the gravel, bells clanging against his chest. He pressed a mason jar into my hands. Inside floated a black mass, thick as tar, with dirt and pine needles suspended within it. "Scraped that off my barn wall last week," he said, breathless. "It's the stuff it uses. If you're writing a paper, you need evidence. But don't keep it still. Shake the jar every so often or it'll start looking for a way out." I shook it on instinct. The tar bucked against the glass like something alive. When I stopped, it congealed into a smooth plug that perfectly matched the curve of the jar. I turned the engine over, relief blooming in the thrum of machinery. But as I reversed, my tires rolled over a perfect circle of hardened clay that hadn't been there when I'd parked. A fresh patch the size of a manhole. I felt the car dip, as if the earth beneath the plug were hollow and deep. For the first time since childhood, I sang aloud, voice cracking, forcing syllables into the unmoving air. The song broke off when my rear wheel climbed back onto normal gravel. A crow cawed in the distance, one blessed, ragged cry, and was instantly silent. I drove until the valley's border where wind began to blow through tall grass, and the ringing of my belt bell faded beneath honest rustling. The relief made me reckless. I killed the engine, unhooked the bell, and listened to the breeze whistle through the car's cracked window. Normal life returning. Then I realized the bell in my hand was vibrating, though no wind touched it. From the jar in the passenger seat came the faintest shift, like liquid settling. The breezy noise outside faltered, hiccuped, and broke. Silence crept across the field toward me, bending wheat stalks not with wind but with absence. As it reached the fence line, every shadow hid behind its object, shrinking to nothing. I jammed the bell back on my belt and floored the accelerator, wheels spitting dirt until the engine's roar overcame the hush, barely. My rearview mirror showed the field smoothing itself as if it had never moved. But the jar in the seat beside me knocked softly against the door, as though something inside had recognized my lapse and felt invited. Back at the motel, I locked the jar in the bathroom sink and let the faucet drip, drip, drip. Safe noise, constant. Still, water alone didn't quell my nerves, so I opened my laptop and began typing these notes, letting the clatter fill the cramped room. The recorder spins beside me. The bell lies on the desk where I can flick it with my finger if my mind wanders. I can't afford to drift. Already the ceiling fan has slowed, as if the motor were losing interest in fighting the stagnant air. I think about my silence on the car ride, the way the empty wind had shuddered when I removed the bell. I think about the plug of clay, the father buried not underground but inside the world's own skin. I think about the jar pulsing in the sink, yearning for any void it can find. And I understand something terrible. In Pembroke, sound is not just defense. It is identity, the very texture that proves you are not a whole. I am writing this last sentence with knuckles white around the keys because the faucet is clogged. The drip stopped mid-fall, water droplet hanging like glass before trembling back up into the spout. The bell on my belt twitches. Somewhere beneath the floor, something shifts, eager. The faucet's sudden stillness felt obscene, as though a living thing had been strangled in the next room. I struck its handle up and down, begging for the plink of water, but only a pocket of air gurgled in the pipes. In the stifled quiet that followed, the glass jar in the sink scraped an inch across porcelain. A smear of black residue remained like a slug's trail behind it. I lurched into motion, kicking the bathroom door just to hear the slap of wood. The jar quivered at the impact, and the tar inside flattened against one side, studying the vibrations. I grabbed my phone, thumbed on a looping recording of subway ambience, brakes screeching, commuters coughing, and turned the volume to maximum. The tinny speaker flooded the motel's hush with synthetic clamor. It felt like shining a flashlight into thick darkness, a fragile cone of protection that might fail at any moment. My first instinct was to flee the valley, but the weight of unfinished work pressed harder than fear. Whatever stalked Pembroke had existed unseen for decades. If I left, someone else, someone quieter, would stumble into its hunger. So I stuffed gear into my backpack, recorder, camera, notebook, bell. The subway loop blared in my pocket, a pocket-sized lifeline, as I marched outside. The morning air smelled of wood smoke and cut hay. Normal rural scents made uncanny by the absence of wind to carry them. Across the parking lot, another guest exited room 4, wearing a necklace of tin bottle caps that rattled against his chest. He held a toddler on his hip, little girl in sunflower pajamas clutching a plastic xylophone. Her tiny mallet tapped out arrhythmic chords that should have sounded joyful but instead rang like a distress beacon. We exchanged tense nods, each recognizing the other's deliberate noise. Then the girl's mallet slipped from her fist and rattled silently onto asphalt. For a fraction of a second she stared after it, lip trembling, her breathing a growing void in the muted air. I was already moving, closing distance, when her father hissed, "Emma, hum for Daddy." He bounced her, jostling the bottle caps, but her mouth only quivered. The silence bit first at my eardrums, then in my chest, hollowing space where sound should be. A low vibration skirted along the motel gutters as if something enormous brushed the building's edge. I scooped the mallet, thrust it back into Emma's hand, and clanged the xylophone's keys myself. Metallic notes scattered outward, the vibration receded like surf retreating down sand. Emma let out a shaky giggle, relief venting as sound, and her father exhaled. "Thank you," he mouthed, then started chanting the alphabet with her, off-key but loud. I returned to my car, heart drumming. The sky remained fixed in matte white, a blank canvas stretched tight. My map from the tavern showed dozens of marks, but one cluster in the North Woods carried bold circles around 3 X's. Notes scrawled beside them read, biggest seal sites, Riverside Pit, Limestone Quarry, Railroad Cut. If I wanted evidence stronger than a jar of living tar, there would be traces there. On the road out of town, I kept the radio tuned between stations, coaxing static that fuzzed and popped with random bursts. Each burst poured into the cabin like oxygen. Yet at the exact moment I crossed the rusted bridge over Willow Creek, the radio died. Not a gradual fade, one instant of static, then nothing. Even the engine's growl dulled, as though thick cloth had been stuffed over the hood. I floored the pedal, but the car responded sluggishly, tires crunching gravel in muffled throbs. Beside the bridge, a grove of spruce trees swayed without wind, needles rustling not from air but as if shaken by invisible hands. Their branches drew toward the road, yearning. My seatbelt bell tinkled, feeble. The phone's subway loop had dwindled to whispered echoes, battery warning flashed red. Something enormous and patient pressed against both sides of reality here, looking for tears to patch. I veered north onto Saddle Road, windows down, shouting a tuneless chant just to hear my own ignorance echo. Ethan's farmhouse surfaced through dust clouds. I clattered onto his porch, found him lashing sheet metal wind chimes along the eaves, each string threaded through massive sleigh bells. The whole place looked like a traveling junk shop, built to jingle at the hint of motion. "You felt it clamp, didn't you?" he asked without turning. Bell cords buzz like bees, valley shrinking. When it's ready, there'll be no safe sound loud enough. I lifted the jar, now sealed in a Tupperware box for double containment, where tar rolled like a restless sea. Ethan stared at it with sorrow. "You need to take that thing far from here. Evidence or not, it's bait. If the hole maker senses its own spillage, it moves to reclaim." "I thought getting samples mattered," I said. "Proof can force real research, maybe federal aid." He barked a short laugh. "Show a senator black ooze, and they'll call it toxic runoff. Show them a man-shaped plug of earth. Someone will say sculpture. The valley knows what lives here. Outsiders will only make more silence." We were interrupted by the metallic groan of his windmill slowing in the still air. Its tail vanes shuddered, then stopped entirely, blades frozen mid-arc. The bells on the porch ropes tingled nervously. Somewhere below the foundation came 3 dull booms, spaced like heartbeats. Whomp, whomp, whomp. Ethan's pupils dilated. He grabbed my arm, hauling me inside where every surface had been weaponized with noise. Baby monitors, cackling white noise, a turntable looping sandpaper under the needle, cuckoo clocks cuckooing without schedule. The combined assault made me dizzy, but straight away I understood its fragility. Break any device and a gap opened. We descended to his cellar. The concrete floor bore a perfect disc of clay, 4 feet wide, flush with surrounding slab. "Dad's hammer under there," Ethan murmured. After he vanished, the plug grew overnight, sealing the basement drain. He knelt and slapped the plug. No echo. Clay drank the sound. Lately it's vibrating. Means the hole maker's restless. The jar in my hands pulsed harder, sympathetic. Tar bulged, forming a snail-like protrusion against plastic, a feeler tasting the cellar's hush. My phone chimed low battery again, then died outright. All noise upstairs ceased in a sudden domino. Cuckoo clocks silent, record player stalled, monitors dead. Only a distant wind chime clanged one final note before choking off. Absolute stillness collapsed around us. I slapped my thighs, sang fractured lyrics of Ring of Fire. Ethan joined, pounding a steel wrench on a pipe. Yet the cellar devoured every impact, muffling them to dull thuds. The clay disc responded, rippled in concentric rings as though underwater. Tar thrust through a crack in the Tupperware seal, droplets stretching toward the disc like magnet to iron. I flung the container across the room where it splattered against a workbench. Black tendrils crawled instantly, lining nail holes and screw heads, filling them flush. "No good," Ethan said, voice hoarse. "It's marking our noises as holes, patching each one." He sprinted up the stairs, bells hammering his chest. I followed, jar abandoned, throat raw from shouting. On the first floor landing we froze. The front door had vanished. In its place stood a wall of seamless pine planks, as if the house had never opened to the world. Every window pane now an opaque sheet of packed yellow clay, sunlight diffused through earthen skin. "Keep moving," Ethan gasped. Grabbing a sledgehammer, he smashed a bank of clay where the kitchen window had been. The blow rang through metal far off, not here, as though the sound tunneled away. The hole sealed before fragments hit the floor, clay reforming like liquid muscle. A thought charged through me. If the hole maker perceived silence as vacancy, then maybe overwhelming it with impossible noise, something it couldn't mold, would overload its instinct. My laptop still rested in the motel room, but the rental's trunk held a portable generator and a busted chainsaw I'd borrowed for ambiance recordings. "Your truck work?" I asked. "Diesel full tank," he said. "Grab every fuel can you own." I explained the plan in jagged bursts, words tripping over fear. We'd drive to the limestone quarry circled on the tavern map. Stone amplified echoes. Even in a vacuum of wind, reverberations bounced. If we rigged engines at opposite walls, revving them into redline, we could create overlapping waves too chaotic to patch. Ethan hesitated, glancing at the tar creeping along the baseboards. "Risky. If silence traps us inside the quarry, the engine's cut. Then we won't have to worry anymore," I answered, "because we'll be a single perfect plug." I expected him to balk at fatalism, but he nodded grimly. Sometimes a gamble appealed more than inevitable suffocation. The clay walls groaned, a deep tectonic complaint, and bulged inward, narrowing rooms. We sprinted toward the back, where a storm door led outside. It too had transformed into clay, but its hinges remained metal. Ethan rammed the sledge under the edge, prying with groans of stressed steel. The latch squealed, metal protesting louder than any bell. Clay cracked, spitting dust. He hit again. The hinge snapped. A wedge of daylight flashed, bright, audible. Birds outside chirped once, sounding startled by their own existence. We dove through. As our bodies cleared the threshold, the gap sealed, but we were already tumbling into grass. Bells rang frantic on Ethan's chest. My belt chime clanged. Around us, pasture stretched, silent, unmoving, but a thin breeze stirred the highest weeds, as if our escape had punched a pinhole in the valley's smothering dome. We leapt into his truck. The engine roared with life, diesel knocking like angry fists. Sound bubbled out the tailpipe in rolling thunder, carving a corridor through quiet. But half a mile down the road, the roar dulled. Noise fled outward faster than we could create it, gobbled by unseen appetite. "Quarry's 5 minutes," Ethan said, teeth clenched. The tar-smeared jar rattled in the truck bed, leaving a dark smear on rusted metal. I banged the dash, chanting nonsense syllables. Bells shivered. At the horizon, limestone bluffs rose like broken teeth. Within their mouth lay our gamble. As we rounded the final bend, I risked a glance at the valley behind us. The road we'd traveled no longer existed, just a smooth ribbon of clay unrolling, erasing ruts, fences, farmhouses in its path. It was as though the hole maker had decided entire acres were holes to be filled and was stitching the landscape shut with earth. The quarry entrance yawned. We gunned the truck through, engine wailing. Echoes ricocheted against rock walls, multiplying. I clambered out before the tires stopped, sprinted to my rental car and yanked the chainsaw free. Ethan wrestled the generator onto the gravel, primed the choke, pulled cord after cord until its motor coughed alive. For one hopeful moment, the combined howl of diesel, generator, and screaming chainsaw formed a wall of sound so thick I felt it in bone. Limestone cliffs returned the cacophony, doubling it, redoubling. The tar in the jar burst its confines, but instead of crawling, splattered inert, confused by the maelstrom. Then the quarry floor quaked. Fissures spidered outward, exhaling puffs of powder. Through each crack, clay surged upward like living mortar, rushing to plug every vibrating cavity in the rock. It advanced faster than I could swing the chainsaw. In seconds, the generator's intake clogged with sludge and stalled. The chainsaw sputtered next, then choked out. Silence poured inward like freezing water. Ethan slammed the truck's horn, long, plaintive, but the sound sagged mid-note as though pinned by invisible force, then ceased. He stepped onto the running board, bells clanging once in valiant defiance. Clay tongues whipped from fissures and slapped them mute against his chest, molding around metal until the bells could not move. I felt the silence press on my eardrums, a vice tightening. The quarry mouth, our exit, drew a curtain of clay as the valley's skin sealed shut. Within seconds, daylight dimmed to the glow of half-formed earth. But even as silence weighed down, an idea flickered. If the creature worked by reflex, filling voids, it must have limits. It sought to mend absence with presence, to patch the world's perceived wounds. If presented with a gap so vast it could never fill it, would it recoil or tear itself apart trying? I ran for the rental's trunk again, grabbed the only thing louder than engines, a case of industrial-grade fireworks I'd filmed last year for a July 4th folklore piece. Ethan's eyes widened as I snapped open the box, yanked fuses like deadly pincushions. He hauled 2 mortar tubes from the pile of quarry rubble while I jammed shells inside. Clay ridges slithered toward us. We lit fuses with my last book of motel matches. Sputtering sparks hissed, and for 3 eternal seconds I feared the quiet would drown them too. Then the first shell whomped skyward, through raw new clay, punching a hole the size of a coffin. A split second later, the sky detonated in a sphere of white fire and thunder that slammed against limestone like a tidal wave. The noise was beyond hearing, pure concussion. The second mortar followed, ripping a wider channel. Clay recoiled, edges shivering, unsure how to seal something that grew in every direction at once. Echo after echo pinballed across walls, deafening, endless, birthing smaller echoes in a chain reaction the creature could not smother. Ethan roared triumph, even though I doubt he heard himself. Beneath our boots, clay threads twitched, indecisive. I knew this respite would be brief. The hole-maker would learn, would pour more of itself to stanch the wound, but for now, sound lived. We tossed the rest of the shells into a pile and set the whole case alight. Fuses sparked in a writhing nest. We sprinted, leaping over fissures. Behind us, the box exploded, all 15 shells launching in a volley that cracked the trapped sky open, flowering thunder and magnesium glare that for an instant made the quarry daylight again. In that artificial dawn, I saw the tar recoil from every surface, flaking like ash. I saw clay walls buckle outward, overfed and swollen. I saw at the heart of the dust storm a shape, impossibly vast, draw back as if blinded. Then the concussions fused into one rolling roar that shattered thought. The quarry floor dropped half a foot as hidden cavities collapsed. I grabbed Ethan's sleeve. Together we sprinted toward the gap the mortars had opened in the exit wall, a ragged tunnel still trembling with echo. We dove through just as clay spattered behind, sealing shut. Outside, the valley air trembled with aftershocks. For the first time, wind rustled tree crowns. A lark chirped, tentative. The sky's matte haze fractured into stripes, clouds actually moving. We stumbled onto the road, coughing dust, ears ringing but gloriously functional. The valley was still too quiet for comfort, yet no longer absolute. Somewhere distant, clay cracked under its own weight, failing to mend. Maybe the hole-maker needed silence as tool and target. Deny it the first, confuse it with the second, and it faltered. But we'd only bought time. Our fireworks were spent, the engines would never start again, and the creature, wounded, would evolve. Ethan straightened, bells rustling. "It's not done." "No," I agreed, "but now we know it can bleed." Far down the road, beyond the town, I saw dust plumes, other trucks fleeing. Word had spread faster than sound itself. Each engine grumbled, each radio blared, weaving a tattered blanket of noise that, if kept alive, might hold the monster at bay long enough for us to plan. Behind us, the quarry belched one last rumble, then silenced, as though taking stock of damage. Clay ridges still advanced, but hesitantly, pieces sloughing off before fusing again. The valley breathed, ragged, but proof it could not suffocate all at once. I picked up a cracked mortar shell, its inner paper still hissing with ember. I shook it near my ear. The faintest pop answered. "We need bigger," I said. "Sustained sound. Something it can't swallow. Power lines," Ethan suggested. "If we can loop high voltage arcing." "Military training range 30 miles east," I countered. "Live fire exercises every weekend." We traded fractured ideas, walking toward the convoy of locals, bells jangling. Every syllable mattered now, not merely as words but as barricades. And high above, clouds rolled, wind alive again, tearing the valley's blank sky into shapes that could whisper, rustle, clash. We had weapons left. Sound, motion, collaboration. The Holemaker had only its instinct. For the first time since setting foot in Pembroke, I believed the valley might learn to sing again. The sky, newly broken into motion, rolled above us like a slow exhale from a long, suffocating lung. The wind that returned was light, timid, uncertain in a place that had forgotten how to carry it. But we felt it, in our hair, against our faces. The gentle press of it against the taut skin of our silence-bruised world was a kind of resurrection. And yet it came with no victory. Just a warning. We hadn't killed it. We'd only made it pause. Ethan and I climbed into the back of the last pickup in the convoy, an open bed truck filled with rusted tools, rusted cans, rusted hope. There were 6 vehicles total, all headed for the edge of the valley, where the military training range supposedly conducted artillery tests twice a month. If the Holemaker couldn't stand brief pockets of noise, we'd test it with something longer. Heavier, louder. We were desperate enough to believe in shrapnel-shaped prayers. We passed the taverner's barn, where I'd first parked days ago. The structure looked mostly the same until you saw the edges. The west-facing wall was no longer wood, but smooth, clay-packed lines that followed the grain of where boards used to be. It had been filled like a tooth, reconstructed not with intention, but reflex. There was no structural support. It was cosmetic, surface, but the Holemaker didn't need it to last. It only needed things to stop being gaps. We didn't stop for supplies. We didn't stop at all. At every turn, the valley sealed itself behind us. Trees fused where we'd passed. Fences reknit with a pale new bark that wasn't wood, wasn't anything. It just wasn't space. Everything left behind was slowly turning into the same mud-smooth surface, flat, sterile, full. The woman from the tavern, Marta, I later learned, drove the lead truck. Her bells were soldered to her steering wheel so she could rattle them by twitching her thumbs. I watched her shoulders rise and fall in time with each clang. We all had noise now, and we wielded it like fire in a cave full of wolves. At the ridge just before the valley's edge, the convoy slowed. Dust curled up in ghostly spirals and hung in the air instead of drifting off. The wind had stopped again, not everywhere, just here. We reached the drop-off where the road bent north, and there we saw it. The land beyond the valley shimmered with distance. Pine trees, guardrails, a water tower in the far-off town of Fairbrook, all intact. But between us and them, where the road should have continued, stood something new. A wall. It hadn't been built, no beams, no mortar, no welds. It had grown, risen, formed out of the same colorless clay that now smothered the interiors of homes and the lungs of the earth. It was seamless, a solid, unbroken barrier stretching across the mouth of the road and far beyond, curling like a serpent's spine into the surrounding hills. People got out of their trucks, stunned into an involuntary quiet, and that's when we heard it. Nothing, but not silence, not the creeping predatory hush we knew. This was worse. It was emptiness, no wind, no insect hiss, no distant engine hum. It was so absent of vibration that even our thoughts felt disloyal. Ethan was the first to move. He stepped forward and clanged the wrench on his belt against the side of the truck bed. Once, twice, hard, it echoed back. Once, twice. Then the sound collapsed, literally collapsed, as if the air had withdrawn consent. The wall absorbed it, not passively. Actively, I whispered. It's adapting. He nodded. It knows we broke the silence, so it's sealing more than places now. It's sealing exits. The others gathered. 6 trucks, 9 people. each of us marked by noisemakers, metal strips, horns, chimes, recordings, each of us watching the wall with the sinking knowledge that it wasn't here to imprison us. It was here to prevent us from leaking out. Ethan pulled a flare gun from the back seat. We hit it with enough force. Maybe we can punch a hole. Drive through. Marta stepped forward, shaking her head. We tried that years ago. The old quarry crew. Dynamite. It filled in faster than they could dig. She reached into her coat and pulled out a mini tape recorder. But it hadn't seen continuous sound then. Maybe now, if we're loud enough. Someone else, Thomas, a gas station mechanic, opened his trunk and began laying out items with rapid, desperate precision: leaf blower, table saw, electric hedge trimmer, all battery operated. I've got noise, not smart noise but real noise. Might hold the wall's attention. The group nodded. We got to work. Within 10 minutes we had a half circle of sound around the trucks. Every motor, speaker, and outlet buzzing or roaring or screeching in overlapping waves. Ethan fired the flare at the top of the wall. It smacked with a hiss and disappeared. No dent, no discoloration, just absorbed. Keep it up, he said. It's listening. I opened my laptop and let it play raw audio from a riot I'd recorded for a separate documentary. Shouts, sirens, breaking glass, chaos. The wall didn't move, but it twitched. I saw it, a ripple, like a bubble flexing from internal pressure. And then something inside the wall pushed back. Not through cracks, there were none. But the clay bulged and pulsed, and a shape bloomed like an ulcer. It wasn't humanoid. It wasn't animal. It was a mouth, maybe, or a lung. A wide, pulsing nothingness rimmed in packed soil. It gaped open with a noise so foreign I didn't hear it. I sensed it, in my knees and molars. It wanted to swallow everything that dared speak. A trumpet player from the high school, just a kid, stood beside his uncle's truck with his battered instrument, lips trembling. When the bulge appeared, he played. 4 off-key notes. The bulge retracted, just slightly, but it retracted. We didn't cheer. None of us had air for it. But a single truth passed silently between us all. It wasn't invincible. Marta flicked on her recorder and held it to the wall, looping a baby's cry. The clay vibrated like it had been slapped, not anger, confusion. This thing doesn't know how to interpret noise it didn't cause, I said. It only fills what it understands, absence. But if we give it something random, it can't categorize it, can't seal it. Ethan's eyes lit with dangerous hope. So we flood it with chaos. We all stepped forward. As one, we played, pounded, yelled. The kid with the trumpet blew until his lips bled. Thomas revved the leaf blower into a banshee howl. Marta played 5 recordings at once. I clanged a crowbar against my recorder, smashing it mid-playback and letting the crushed casing sing. The wall rippled again. The bulge split. The tiniest seam formed at the base, a crack. The ground shivered. More, Ethan bellowed. We pressed the sounds harder. We shook the air. A woman who hadn't spoken once since the quarry screamed a poem into the clay, each word wobbling in air like a blade. The crack grew. A wind gusted through, the first in minutes, cool, real, sharp-edged. Then the clay shredded. Not broke, not collapsed, it recoiled. A 10-foot section of wall pulled back like a slug reacting to salt. A gap opened wide enough for one truck to pass. "Go!" Marta shouted. The convoy engines roared. Bells rang. Chainsaws wailed. The first vehicle surged through. Then the second, a third. I stayed back, helping Ethan light the last fireworks we'd saved from the quarry. One more salvo, just to keep the gap open long enough. We lit the wicks and ran. As our truck hurtled toward the wall, the fireworks launched from the bed. Red, green, gold. They exploded above, echoing off the deadened hills, forcing air to vibrate again. The hole held. We burst through into wind, into birdsong, into freedom. Behind us, the wall reformed, not instantly, sluggish like it was in pain. The last firework burst just as the seam sealed. We were out, but we weren't safe, not really. The highway unfurled ahead of us in a blessed wash of motion and color. Trees waved lazily in a genuine breeze. Birds flitted across the pale blue sky. A semi passed in the opposite lane, tires hissing, engine droning in a low mechanical growl that made my chest ache with relief. Every sound, mundane, forgettable, alive, felt like sunlight in a coal mine. Ethan was white-knuckling the steering wheel, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror every few seconds. He didn't say a word until we crossed a Greene County sign, "Welcome to Fairbrook." Then, softly, we made it. I didn't answer, because we hadn't, not completely. We'd escaped the physical perimeter of Pembroke Valley, but that wasn't where the Holemaker ended. It was just where it had started. The air behind us was still unnaturally still. I turned, watched as the tree line bordering the valley shimmered, not with heat, but with wrongness. It was subtle, a warping of the light, a quieting of the world. The wall had sealed, yes, but the silence pressed against it like water behind a dam, and that dam now had cracks. At the first gas station past town, the convoy pulled in. Everyone climbed out slowly, eyes red, hands still jittering from adrenaline and echo trauma. The trumpet kid slumped in the back seat of Marta's car, mouth streaked with dried blood. Marta kept looping the baby's cry on her recorder, even though we were miles away. Nobody told her to stop. I stepped into the station's mini-mart, the chime over the door shocking in its brightness. The cashier, a bored teen in a baseball cap, barely glanced up. I grabbed water, batteries, cough drops, and a pack of firecrackers. When I reached the counter, he looked up at last, noticed my dirt-caked clothes, the bell hanging from my belt. "Road trip?" he asked. My voice cracked. "Sort of." He tilted his head. "You from Pembroke?" The name made my stomach tighten. "Yeah," I said. He nodded toward a battered flyer taped to the counter. "Town's been closed off all week. National Guard says it's a sinkhole situation." I stared at the flyer, black and white printout, government seal, typical boilerplate emergency language. But something about the way the image was cropped bothered me. It was a satellite shot. The valley was visible, but the center of it was blurry, not pixelated. Just soft, like someone had smudged the ink. Not someone, something. I looked closer. There was a smear running out of the valley, a subtle trail. "You see that?" I asked. The cashier shrugged. "Printer's crap. It's probably just—" "No," I said. "That's not a glitch. That's a vein." Ethan appeared beside me, one hand holding a bottle of rubbing alcohol, the other clenching the truck keys. He followed my gaze, eyes hardening. "It's spreading. Can we stop it?" He didn't answer, just turned and walked out. We regrouped at the Fairbrook Community Park, the only place large enough for everyone to gather and sit without drawing attention. We found a shaded pavilion, sat in a wide ring and passed around water, cough drops, cough syrup, anything to keep throats active and the air broken. That was the unspoken rule now. Don't let it get quiet. "Everyone okay?" Marta asked. A few nods, a few thousand-yard stares. Thomas, the mechanic, rubbed his eyes. "We need to go to the news. Real reporters. Make noise that matters." Ethan shook his head. "Won't work. This isn't just an anomaly. It's not just local. It's aware. You make too much noise in the wrong way, it learns to adapt." "But if we don't tell people," someone began. "It wins," I finished. We were trapped in a paradox. Sound saved us, but if we screamed too loudly, we might teach it new frequencies. If we stayed quiet, it would retake ground in silence. It was like trying to fight fire with both gasoline and water and never knowing which one you were holding. "What about the range?" I asked. "The training ground east of here. We were headed that way." Ethan nodded slowly. "Artillery noise. Live shells, loud, layered, irregular. If anything can stun it, that might—" "Then we go." "Not all of us," Marta said. "Split up. Make pockets of resistance. If it comes at one group, the others might buy time." We divided into 3 teams. Group A, Ethan, Marta, and me, would take the truck to the training range. Group B would head west toward the old rail tunnels in the hills. Their echoes went deep, endless. Group C would circle back south, stop at every gas station, church, and shopping center and make noise. Speakers, generators, car alarms, not to alert, to wound. We would scatter like antibodies in a dying body. That night, we slept in shifts, firecrackers tied to tripwires, radios blaring nonsense poetry, An old man snoring into a megaphone while his daughter tapped a triangle every 30 seconds like a metronome of life. At 2:17 a.m., I woke to silence, not total, just reduced. The radio beside me had fizzled, its static now soft like breath. I sat up. The park lights were out. The trees had stopped moving. Ethan lay 2 feet away, clutching a saucepan he'd used to bang in his sleep. Marta sat at the picnic table, eyes wide, recorder blinking red, looping a recording of our convoy. "It's close," she whispered. I saw it then, not with my eyes but with a kind of terrible instinct, a presence moving through the stillness like a wolf through fog. It had no form, but it erased form. It didn't consume, it corrected. Wherever it stepped, the world got smooth, simplified. I crawled to Ethan and shook his shoulder. He woke, banged the pan. The noise sliced through the air like a machete. The stillness twitched. Marta stood. "We need to leave, now." No one objected. We left the pavilion behind, running for the truck, every step a clatter of survival. The firecrackers along the perimeter had not gone off. The tripwires were still in place. The creature, if it could be called that, had slipped past them. It didn't trigger noise, it evaded it. I realized then that it didn't fear sound the way we assumed. It didn't flee from it like a wounded animal. It simply couldn't fill places that already echoed. But once the sound stopped, even for a moment, it could undo us. We drove east through Fairbrook, outpacing the hush. I glanced at the side mirrors, expecting headlights or wildlife. Instead, I saw buildings begin to blur. The edges of gas stations, streetlights, even mailboxes, their outlines softened as if being unsketched. "It's not the valley anymore," Ethan said. "It's everywhere we've been." That's when it hit me. The wall didn't just stop people from leaving Pembroke, it stopped sound from leaving. We hadn't escaped. We'd freed it. We drove fast, the kind of fast where the wheel jumps in your hands and the hood rattles like it might fly off. The engine howled, gloriously, defiantly, down the 2-lane road stretching toward the military training range. I watched the speedometer climb past 80 and wondered if it was enough to outrun something that didn't move through space the way we understood it. Not a creature, not a force, but a correction. A phenomenon shaped like hunger. No one in the truck spoke. We didn't want to risk making words meaningless. Our noise had to be deliberate now, focused. Noise was identity, noise was armor. But too much noise, too complex, too patterned, and the thing learned. So we let the truck's roar speak for us. The hills beyond Fairbrook opened up in layers, and the sign came into view. Fort Grainer Ordnance Testing Grounds, authorized personnel only. The road forked at a chain-link gate half collapsed from age. Marta downshifted, the engine growling like a bear woke in mid-hibernation. "No guards?" I asked. "Weekend," Ethan said. "No tests. Just empty buildings and piles of metal we hope will do the job." The gate creaked as we nudged it aside with a bumper. Beyond it stretched a field of pockmarked dirt and concrete husks, blast bunkers, test stations, collapsed towers. The air smelled like dust, oil, and something faintly metallic, and it was quiet, not the deadly hush of Pembroke. Not yet, but quieter than it should have been. No wind, no insects, no birds. The kind of quiet you notice a second too late, like a ticking clock that's just stopped. We parked near what looked like a decommissioned command post, concrete bunker, rusted door, a satellite dish on its roof, half torn from its mount. Ethan leapt out and began pulling cables from the truck bed. Generators, a set of portable speakers, our last case of fireworks. It was everything we had left. "We make the whole site vibrate," he said. "Not in rhythm, no loops, no cycles, just chaos. Then we see if it comes, and if it doesn't?" I asked. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. We set up in silence, save for the necessary clangs and thuds of equipment. I rigged one generator to the old PA system mounted to a pole near the fence. The horn speaker crackled to life, feedback screaming once before settling into a low whine. Marta hooked her phone into an amp and hit play. It blasted the sound of her son's third-grade school concert. Off-key recorders, laughing children. a principal trying to shout over it all. "God, that's awful," Ethan muttered. "That's the point." I unpacked the fireworks and began jamming them into the dirt at different angles. If we had to launch them, I wanted the explosions to come from all directions, noise layered in time and space. A firestorm the Holemaker couldn't process. By the time the sun started to dip, the range echoed with overlapping, jarring noise, someone's ringtone, a clip of a marching band, Ethan hammering a steel beam with a crowbar, Marta banging a pot lid against a stop sign. It was less a soundscape and more a tantrum against the silence. I was walking toward the main bunker when I saw it. At first, just a shimmer, the light bending over the ridgeline. I thought it was heat haze, but the air was cold now. Then I saw the grass flatten, no wind, no weight, just flattening, like the world was smoothing itself. I turned and ran. "It's coming!" I screamed. "North Ridge!" Marta dropped her pot lid and fired a flare. The green trail soared into the sky, burst above us in an artificial thundercrack. For a moment, the shimmer slowed. But it didn't stop. Ethan sprinted for the PA pole and cranked the volume until the metal began to hum. The children's concert warped into pure distortion, too loud for fidelity, too jagged for the Holemaker to mimic. It twisted the air itself, and still the shimmer came on. Not fast, not like a chase, like a glacier, like a decision. It didn't move toward us, it included us. The ground in front of the bunker cracked. No tremor, no quake, just a sudden seam, straight and clean, like someone had pressed a box cutter into the dirt. From it, a thin line of clay oozed upward, only a few inches tall, but it moved with intent. Ethan stepped forward and emptied a gas can over it, then he lit a match. The flame whooshed to life, crackling, hungry. The clay bubbled, hissed, twisted back on itself. For a breathless moment, I thought it might retreat. Then the fire vanished. Not burned out, gone, snuffed without oxygen or wind. 1 second there. Next, erased. The clay line smoothed again. I saw it clearly now. Not a shimmer, not a mass. But a concept made real. An idea that the world should be flat. That every crack, every gap, every silence, every pause was wrong. It was a patch, and we were holes. Ethan turned to me, breath ragged. "We need more." "The fireworks." I ran, lit the first fuse, then the second, a third. 3 bursts exploded into the twilight. Red, white, blue, but louder than colors had any right to be. It shook the hill. It shook me. The clay rippled, as if struggling to remember what shape it was supposed to take. Marta hit play on her final recording, her late husband's laughter. It filled the range like a living thing, that laugh full of life and error, joy and sorrow. It cut across the stillness like a sword, and the Holemaker screamed, not aloud, but through the land, a pressure wave, a pulse of wrongness that bent steel beams, shattered windows, and made us drop to our knees. My vision went gray at the edges, but it had felt pain. We were still holes, still open, still wrong. I stood. Blood ran from one ear. My vision swam. But I lit the last firework, raised it like a torch, and screamed until my throat tore open. The final shell launched skyward. It exploded into pure white, and in that light I saw the Holemaker falter, not die, but falter. Its edge receded, just a foot, then 2. The seam in the earth sealed in reverse, like it was ashamed, and then, just as the pie shorted out and the last generator died, it vanished. No flash, no collapse, just gone. Silence rushed in like a tide, and the wind, just barely, began to blow again. Under the dying echo of the last mortar blast, silence rolled in, real silence this time. Not the living, predatory hush of Pembroke, but the natural kind, the kind you get in the aftermath of something enormous when the world forgets what it was doing. A hush of shock, of survival. I couldn't hear much through the ringing in my ears. My head throbbed in sync with my heartbeat. My teeth buzzed. There was blood on my collar, on my hands, in my mouth. I must have bitten something when the pulse hit. Everything in me screamed to move, but I couldn't yet. None of us could. Ethan sat slumped against the remains of a cinder block wall, face streaked with soot, staring up at the sky like it had never been there before. Marta crouched by the last speaker, her recorder fried and melted at the edges. A thin trail of smoke curled up from it like incense. She tapped it once, twice. Nothing. The air was moving. The clouds were drifting again, high and slow and uncaring. A hawk soared overhead. No shimmer, no folding of light. The wind stirred my shirt collar. A leaf blew across the cracked pavement and didn't flatten itself against the ground. It just skittered, awkward and beautiful. The homemaker was gone. For now, no one cheered. We didn't speak. It didn't feel like victory, just reprieve. A breath held for too long finally released, but with the knowledge that you'd have to inhale again and soon. That it might be waiting on the next breath. I stood slowly, legs trembling. We regrouped at the center of the test range where the last of the fireworks smoke still lingered like a ghost. The ground was scorched, cratered in places, but the clay was gone. No new patches, no smoothing. The lines between things had held. We had held. "We need to go back," Marta said quietly. Ethan turned to her. "What? Back to Pembroke? To the town, to the people, to anyone still inside the boundary. We don't know how wide it reached after we left." She rubbed her temples. "And we don't know if we stopped it, or if we just confused it." She was right. We'd heard it. But we hadn't killed it. Maybe we couldn't. Maybe it wasn't the kind of thing that could die. It was a reflex, a survival instinct. The world trying to heal itself without understanding what was a wound and what was us. Still, I hesitated. If we go back, it could anchor itself again, learn from what we did, fix whatever we broke. And if we don't, Ethan asked, his voice hoarse, then it festers, grows, finds a way out later, stronger. The decision made itself. We gathered what gear still functioned, a few speakers, a dented megaphone, some kind of experimental subwoofer we hadn't used, half broken but humming faintly. We loaded the truck in silence, listening always to the wind, to the creak of the trees, to the way birds called in the distance. At dusk, we reached the edge of Pembroke Valley again. The wall was still there. It had changed. Gone was the smooth clay veneer. Now it looked fractured. Spidery cracks spread like veins across its surface. Places where echoes had lived too long, clawing into its instinct, forcing imperfections it didn't know how to repair. It rippled sometimes, like a sheet held too tightly between two people, pulling in different directions. It was unsettled. "We made a scar," Ethan whispered. Marta pressed her palm to the wall. "Let's make more." The firework shell we'd saved for last, the big one, the finale, was too damaged to launch. So we wedged it into a crack in the wall and rigged a wire from the truck battery. When it blew, the entire segment of clay buckled inward, coughing dust and dirt and something darker, like wet ash. For a brief moment, we saw inside. I don't know what I expected. Maybe some endless dark, or tunnels, or a brain. But it wasn't anything like that. It was flatness. Inside the breach was a world without layers, like depth and distance had been folded shut, like the idea of a room, or a gap, or even a thought of separation had been ironed out until all things touched, pressed into one another like pages glued together. It was wrong in a way the human brain isn't built to understand. Our eyes need space, our minds need contrast. That was the horror of it. There was no contrast left. We stepped back, shielding our eyes. The clay stitched itself back together slower than before. Sloppy, like it didn't want to but didn't know what else to do. And then we heard it. From inside the wall, buried deep within the quiet, a sound. Not a growl, not a roar. A voice, singing. A single note, warbling and broken, like a child trying to remember a tune from long ago. A noise the homemaker had absorbed but not understood. It had kept it, was trying it. "What is that?" I asked, voice shaking. Marta leaned forward, straining to hear. "I think it's trying to hum." It wasn't mimicry. It wasn't malicious. It was something older than comprehension, trying to imitate the one thing it didn't know how to fill. Noise, not sound, not volume. Noise, imperfect, unique, alive. Ethan took a deep breath. "We gave it something it can't replicate." "Not yet," Marta corrected. We stood there a long time, just listening, just waiting. Eventually the humming faded, the cracks sealed, the wind blew again, soft and real. We left markers behind, dozens of them. Speakers rigged to car batteries, recordings on loops, generators buried under dirt with vibration plates. We scattered them across Pembroke's Edge like landmines of sound, deterrents of rhythm and error and human warmth. We couldn't be sure they'd hold, but we had to try. In the weeks that followed, we went public, carefully, not with video or photos, those blurred, corrupted every time we tried, but with sound. Audio files of field recordings, throat singing, static, music played backward, fireworks exploding, laughter layered over sobbing. None of it explained, all of it shared. We seeded them across the internet with vague labels: white noise generator, found audio, field sample 03. We encouraged remixing, sampling, echoing. It wasn't the truth, not exactly, but it was noise. And the more noise in the world, the fewer places silence could nest. I still wear my bell, a new one now, steel-tuned, heavy. I've learned to talk to myself in the car, to tap my fingers when I'm thinking, to whistle when I'm worried. I've stopped searching for perfect quiet. There's no such thing anymore. And maybe that's okay, because I know now what silence really is. It isn't peace, it isn't rest, it's need. It's a hole that thinks we're the patch, and it's still out there, waiting,